Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the first Forge Roadmap webinar of the year. We're really excited to have you. The purpose of this webinar is to have a conversation with you about what we've shipped over the last quarter for Forge and what we have in the pipeline that's coming soon. So as always, before we begin, I just want to run through how to participate, how to catch up on anything that you might miss. The team is coming to you live today and the presentation will be interactive. So if you have a question at any point during the presentation, please drop it in the Q&A widget in Zoom. We're going to save all of the questions until the end and we'll get through as many as we have time for. Sometimes your questions might require a little bit more research to properly answer. So if we aren't able to get to your question live, do please follow up with us in the developer community forum and we'll try to address that question afterwards. And then finally, I will say today's webinar is being recorded. So you'll get that recording by email. It usually takes about 3 days or so to get it edited. Our agenda for today, our opening remarks are going to start off with Adarsh Vidara. He heads up the Forge product team. The focus will be on some of the changes to the Forge roadmap that have come about as a result of reprioritizations. After that, we're going to go into roadmap updates and end things with some live Q&A. We have a pretty wide range of updates to share with you today. They include Forge for Bitbucket, some storage updates, improvements to the Forge runtime, and lots more. And of course, the disclaimer slide. The timelines that we share today do reflect our current investments in Forge and estimates to the best of our ability. So please note that these are forward-looking statements. Features and timelines are subject to change. And so with that, I'm very pleased to introduce our first speaker, Adarsh.
Thanks, Karen. Hello, everyone. My name is Adarsh. I lead the Forge product teams. I have met some of you at App Week or in various Zoom calls. So welcome again for this year's first Forge webinar. As a company and a community, we have shared some highs and lows over the last months, right? February absolutely began on a high note with App Week. We all meeting us in Berlin. And there's nothing like getting to spend time in the same room with partners and solving problems together. It had been 3 years since our last in-person developer event due to COVID. We were long overdue and App Week was well worth the time we spent together in App Week. But we have also had some hard changes come about recently. Many of you may already heard about the staff rebalancing at Atlassian. We had to say goodbye to some of our closest friends and colleagues. These changes come on the heels of the short-term but large-scale reprioritization across the company. We are operating in a very challenging and changing macroeconomic environment, which requires thoughtful realignment. These changes will enable us to move faster on top priorities to serve the needs of our customers. We will be reinvesting in areas where we see opportunity to deliver value to our customers, including in some of our cloud migrations, ITSM, and serving our enterprise customers in the cloud. This makes the work our partners and you all developers are doing more important than ever to support those customers who are moving to the cloud. During App Week, we kicked off a number of early access programs and got many new features in the hands of partners. Getting feedback on pre-release features is critical, and App Week reduces the feedback loop considerably. Developers try something, we hear the feedback, immediately we try to solve it. If not, we gather a ton of insights that we can actually take it back to our development team and iterate over it in order to make our platform better and suit all the needs that you have. During these webinars, we communicate our plans as far out as we can based on the partner feedback. Open communication doesn't just mean talking about what we will do. It also means talking about the timelines that have changed or when we have paused work on a feature that you are highly anticipating. We have made the decision to temporarily pull back in some of the areas of long-term investment so our teams can refocus their efforts to work that will help Atlassian make near-term impact to our top priorities. This does have some implications for a handful of future Forge features. At this time, we'll pause work on Forge Mobile and granular scopes. We know that this comes as disappointing news, particularly for partners who have actually made plans and working with us on Forge Mobile EAP at App Week. However, we believe these changes are necessary in order to focus on near-term value and growth for our customers and partners. The individuals previously assigned to these projects will shift their focus on areas that we think are most important to support our cloud migration. Because of the specialized skill set, the engineers who are working on Forge Mobile have been moved out of our ecosystem team in helping other teams to hit the critical priorities for the broader Atlassian strategy. While we will be pausing Forge Mobile for the time being, we are redoubling our commitment to other key enhancements to our developer platform. These include the new Forge Runtime, which we'll speak more on it later in the presentation, multi-user app ownership, which will enable teams to work together and build apps together collaboratively, client-side UI kit, which makes Forge front-end components more flexible, powerful, and performant so that you can build really high-quality apps on Forge, and an initiative, what we call App Data Access Control, which will give admins the ability to control apps, access to sensitive content within Atlassian products. We'll also be continuing business as usual and many other roadmap features, including app monitoring, Forge support for Bitbucket, etc. Stay tuned for the roadmap updates portion of the webinar for the latest details on the timelines. There are several programs that sit a bit further out of our timeline, which again, we'll be sharing these updates in the upcoming Forge webinars. The first is data residency for Forge apps. We know this is important for our enterprise customers, and we already started doing the groundwork necessary in order to get it going. The second is the ability for Connect apps to adopt Forge capabilities. This is a key piece for our long-term strategy and for Atlassian Developer Platform. Interoperability will allow apps to use the features that need across both the platforms and also bring Connect and Forge closer together into a single platform. We know that these features are important to you. We are working to provide more value to our partners through the Forge platform and making the value accessible to partners, whether they currently build on Forge or on Connect. Roadmap trade-offs can be tough news, but we are confident that these changes will result in a stronger business for Atlassian and for our partners and also help our customers to migrate towards the cloud. In the last few quarters, we are seeing a majority of new apps listed on Marketplace are Forge apps. This is great. As we continue to strengthen the platform with more features and capabilities without compromising the reliability or security of the platform. If you have any questions about the Forge programs we have paused or ones we have accelerated, please get in touch through the developer community forum. Next, I'll pass the mic over to Joe to share Forge roadmap updates.
Hello, hi, it's Joe here. I'm here to provide you with an update on the Forge Runtime project. In case you missed the update from last quarter, I'll be recapping the scope of the project, why it's important, and why, like me, I hope you're eagerly looking forward to its release. So a quick summary of where we are with Forge today. When Forge apps are invoked in our production environment, your bundled app code is run within an isolated VM that runs inside the V8 engine. It's not actually Node. The sandbox itself is hosted by the Node.js runtime provided by AWS Lambda, and all access in and out of the sandbox to your app's code is mediated by a trusted bridge library, which allows Forge apps to call Atlassian REST and GraphQL APIs and communicate with external domains. So this sandbox has some pretty important security advantages that form part of the kind of fundamental security value proposition of Forge. One of the first ones is that it ensures that Forge apps can only communicate back to the site or product that's currently being invoked. And that's important for ensuring that customer data can't accidentally be leaked or contaminated across installations. Or Karen, you can jump to the next slide, please. That's what we call tenant isolation. And the second advantage is egress enforcement. So we're able to use this sandbox to prevent unauthorized access to the internet. 4JAPs are only permitted to communicate through the bridge to external hosts if they declare that capability in the app manifest, which is reviewed and approved by the administrator on installation. So we're able to talk to customers with more clarity about when they install apps, where their data might go and how they can maintain control of it. So this does come with some trade-offs. Bootstrapping that isolated VM every time we run your app in a Lambda does take some time. So there is a performance overhead to running 4JAPs today. And additionally, as I mentioned, your app isn't actually running in Node. It's running in V8, which means that, sorry, back one slide. Yep, got it. Which means that if you depend on any built-in Node modules, they're actually not there unless we polyfill them for you. So we have polyfilled some of the most commonly used Node libraries, but not all of them. So if you depend on some of those Node built-in modules that we haven't replicated, or you use a third-party library, which depends on one of those modules, which is a common situation, you might get unexpected or broken behavior. And finally, the technology we're depending on, this isolated V8, the V8 isolate, it's language specific, right? You have to run V8 in order to run that layer. So even though Lambda itself provides support for multiple languages, we're only able to support 4JAPs built in JavaScript and TypeScript unless we invest a similar amount of effort in re-implementing a similar sandbox for each new language we want to support on Forge. And that's not going to be scalable or sustainable in the long term. So our new runtime that we're working on, the native Node.js runtime, will run 4JAPs directly on the runtime provided by AWS. And thanks to a little bit of AWS magic and some hard work from the Forge Compute team, we've figured out a way to preserve the existing benefits of the current sandbox runtime, but also eliminate most of the downsides. So performance is going to be improved because we're not snapshotting and bootstrapping that isolate layer in the sandbox every time you invoke your app. Compatibility problems will be eliminated because we're just running plain Node instead of having to polyfill things. And while we aren't yet committing to multi-language support, we've removed one of the major blockers to supporting this in the future. And I know that there'll be partners out there who maintain both cloud apps and data center apps going forward, for which being able to share a code base across them will be very exciting. So it still remains something that's high on our future-looking radar, or something we want to tackle, even though we're not committing to it just yet. So to give you a view of what it looks like now on the new runtime, the native Node.js runtime ditches the sandbox and replaces it with an outbound proxy that sits outside of the Lambda, but in the Lambda's VPC. And it sits between the Lambda and the rest of the world. And it continues to provide the same security benefits. It ensures that outbound requests to Atlassian Cloud APIs are scoped to the right installation, and it enforces egress to only happen when declarations have been made in the manifest. So we still get most of the same benefits provided by our original architecture. So we recently ran a small initial test of the new runtime with about 12 participants at App Week, which is super exciting because it's the first time the runtime had been tried out by anyone outside of Atlassian. And our goal there was to do some initial broader compatibility testing with a greater variety of apps beyond the ones that we had built ourselves, and get some initial feedback about whether or not there were any improvements to both performance and to the compatibility issues that we're fixing. And on both cases, resoundingly, the feedback was very positive. Forge apps noticeably snappier when running on the new runtime, even though there still are a number of other performance concerns that we need to address in the long term. The cold start times and invocation overheads substantially improved, and people are now able to use a bunch of very popular client libraries like the AWS Client SDK. Previously very difficult to run in the old sandbox runtime, just kind of works out of the box now. So we have a couple of developers who are now eagerly awaiting the release. We're getting closer to that point. We had hoped to be launching to production in June, but there's been some conflicting priorities that have resulted in us pushing out that timeline. So we're still looking for a public early access in June, July in Q3, and now looking forward to a formal public release later in the year. So between now and the next webinar, I hope I'm coming back to talk to you about how the EAP is now available and to get some feedback about how it's changed the compatibility and performance of your Forge apps. So I'm really looking forward to it. That's all from me. And now I'll hand over to Adam.
Thank you, Joe. Very cool. And hi, everyone. I'm Adam, another PM working on Forge, and here to share some updates on some auth and UI related projects that we've been working on. Let's jump into the first slide. Very happy to announce that we are in EAP with unlicensed user access in JSM Forge apps. It's also often referred to as anonymous access, but it's actually more than that. It means you can make your Forge app available to any type of user in the JSM portal. That includes customer accounts, Atlassian users that don't have a JSM license, and also, of course, anonymous users that aren't logged in at all. And importantly, thanks to your feedback, it also includes ASAP API access and access to Forge storage as well. And for anyone with an existing JSM app, don't worry, you'll need to opt in via the manifest to allow access to these types of users. So you won't get any nasty surprises with users you weren't expecting as soon as this goes live. So as I said, we're currently in EAP at the moment, which you can join via the link that was just popped in the chat. But all going well, we'll move through to general availability on the 11th of April, just after Easter, and it'll be available for everyone. So thanks again, everyone, for your patience on this one. I know it's been a long time coming since we announced the JSM modules last year, but we're really excited to have this out and in time for Team 23 as well. But speaking of a long time coming, let's talk about end user consent. Firstly, I need to apologize. We planned to have this work out by this webinar, but it's just taking longer than we expected, and we've delayed the new ETA until June. Priority-wise, nothing's changed. It's still at the top of the list, and we know how important it is to everyone, and we're actively working on it. And we've actually put more engineers into that team to make sure we can hit that new June date. When it is available, you won't need to make any changes to your app, but you will need to do a release. So just stay tuned on the usual channels for more details about sort of when that's going to be available and what you'll need to do. And finally, from me, carry on from what Adash mentioned earlier, we are continuing to work on the client-side version of UIKit, which is going to be a huge improvement over the current UIKit. I've talked about it in previous webinars, but key features include a new client-side runtime, so you can have that snappy interactivity. It's got styling and layout for more flexibility, and even a new frame component, which allows you to embed custom UI into UIKit, which is going to be really cool. We've run a really successful EAP this quarter, and we've got some really good feedback. We're just making sure we take all that feedback on board, making a few tweaks around the developer experience and things like that, and just making sure we're ready to support production apps. I don't have a specific date for preview that I'm going to announce today, but stay tuned and we'll let you know soon. And that's all from me here in New Zealand. I'll pass over to Poland to talk Jira.
Right, thanks, Adam. I think client-side UIKit will be great, and it will be awesome to have it for all Forge modules in Jira. And hello, everyone. I'm Jakub, and today with Grażyna, we will share with you an update about Jira extensibility. Yeah, we are pretty excited that we can share the fact that Forge custom fields have reached general availability. Also, last quarter, we finished work on the UM modification for global issue crate. They are ready there. And we have released jQuery functions early access program. On the other hand, we paused the work on the custom fields, inline edit, and display conditions, mainly to focus more on UM modifications. A few things are in progress, like workflow extensibility, jQuery functions, UM modifications, custom fields, events. And we have started work on something new, which will be a small bonus, a small surprise. Yeah, for custom fields, they are ready. Almost 50 apps have been built with more than 5,000 installs. We have improved the documentation based on your feedback, fixed the major bugs, And we have other display conditions for global issue create to have the consistent approach for the issue view and global issue create. And we plan to invest here in the long term. So if you haven't tried, you should try it. When it comes to UI modifications for global issue create, recently we have added support for many additional fields and 2 new methods. So basically, we support all major fields on the global issue create. And this is the fastest growing group of Forge apps. 10 apps, 5,000 installs, not bad, right? And of course, we have artificial intelligence here. There is an app which uses AI to generate the issue description, which is cool. And finally, GPL functions, early access program. It is for Connect and for Forge, which is important. Right now, we work on the performance, and next step here is general availability release. You can track the progress in the Forge project. And Grażyna, over to you.
Thanks, Jakub. As we informed in the previous webinars, we have been working on Jira workflows extensibility for Forge. We have already released Jira workflow validator and condition modules, as you see in the tickets that I am sharing on the screen. When it comes to the Jira workflow condition module, you can now define a custom UI to create, edit, or display the workflow condition configuration, save workflow configuration to the config context variable, override the Jira expressions defined in the manifest with those stored in the workflow condition configuration. And already we are seeing the marketplace on the marketplace new apps built on Forge using those modules, which is quite cool. But in order to close the loop, we are working on Jira post functions module for Forge. Next slide, please. Please watch the ticket that I'm showing on the screen. We'll share further updates over there, but we are targeting Q2 this calendar year to be finally released, as we would like to deliver a complete experience for app builders around workflow extensibility, and we, of course, will be looking for your feedback afterwards. Secondly, next slide, please. I'd like to inform you that we have started working on increasing the coverage of Jira product events for Forge. Forge apps will be able to subscribe to new events related to projects, versions, workloads, sprint, attachment, component, and probably so on. We will keep you informed via changelog announcements as we will go. Probably first we'll be releasing create update events and later delete events for the group of functionalities that I've shared on the screen, and updating the Forge tickets that are publicly available. That's from my side. Jakub, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Grażyna. Events are very important, right? And Forge apps need to be able to react on them. So this is the small surprise, a bonus. So currently on the Jira issue view, the only way to keep apps UI up to date is to pull data from Jira, which is far from being perfect. So thanks to this work, Jira will be able to notify, connect, and Forge apps via an event about the issue update, and apps will be able to react. So I hope no more it means no more pooling and less problems with Jira rate limiting. But please be aware that this is a spike. This work may be cancelled. We don't want to impact the issue performance. So this is just a spike, but it looks promising. And let's see. You can watch the ticket in the Forge project as always. Yeah, and custom fields. This is like a strategic area for us. We have started to work on Forge custom fields background refresh, which is of course connected to the previous spike. We work on improvements for formatter, and next we'll focus on client-side UIKit integration for issue view and the global issue create, basic search support, and we plan to support 2 additional data types, text type and the date type. When it comes to UI modifications, I think the biggest news here is that we have started work on the issue view. This work is in progress. What is more, we work on the method which will allow you to hide options in the select fields, and on some configuration improvements. Like from the long-term perspective, we plan to add support for the issue view, then transition view, and then JSM. And of course, you can track it in the Forge project. That is all. Thanks for your time. Over to Edmund.
Perfect. Thank you. Hey, everyone. For anyone who doesn't know me, so my name is Edmund. I am a senior product manager in Bitbucket Cloud. Last year, we announced that Bitbucket Cloud was intending to implement Forge. I'm here to give you an update on how that's going and provide some context around our longer-term plans when it comes to extensibility for Bitbucket Cloud and our plans specifically for Forge. Next slide, please. There we go. So what is our vision for Bitbucket Cloud in the context of extensibility? That's a really good question. And I think that's kind of evolved quite a lot over time. And people have asked, how committed is Bitbucket to extensibility? We've had a slightly different implementation of Connect compared to some of the other apps. And so this question around what does Bitbucket Cloud want to be when it comes to extensibility is really topical. We are really banking on extensibility being a critical part of our strategy moving forward. We want Bitbucket Cloud to be a really strong contender in the enterprise Git and CI/CD space. And we believe that one of the ways to do that is to allow Bitbucket Cloud to become the foundation for customers' own DevOps platforms. So when customers are building out their own systems for delivering code, delivering software, we see Bitbucket being kind of the core of that and the foundation, but we see a lot of the capabilities that those customers need coming through our extensibility framework using tools like Forge. Next slide. So to achieve this, we've set ourselves a goal. We want to become the industry's most extensible cloud SCM and CI/CD product. This is an ambitious goal, but it's something that we know Atlassian has a lot of history in. We know that our server and DC products have been incredibly successful in this way, and that in terms of when you compare the just raw user numbers for our server and DC Bitbucket products compared to things like Jira and Confluence, our extensibility sort of track record when it comes to Bitbucket is actually quite strong in the server and DC market in the enterprise space. So we're looking to try and replicate that success in the cloud space in Bitbucket Cloud. Next slide. So to achieve this, we are going all in on Forge, and we're also going all in on standardization. And for those that have a bit more history around Bitbucket Cloud and extensibility, you'll know why I'm calling out that standardization point. In the past, Bitbucket Cloud had an implementation of Connect, which was, let's say, less than standard. It wasn't the exact same as what was being used in Jira and Confluence. And that caused a lot of pain points. It also made it really difficult for us to do things like integrate with the Atlassian Marketplace, which is one of the reasons why even today, although you can find Bitbucket Cloud apps in the Atlassian Marketplace, you cannot purchase them, and we do not support monetization. These are really big things that we need to solve as part of this overarching kind of plan. And the way we're planning to do that is to basically adopt the standard Atlassian extensibility framework and go all in on Forge. Now, one of the things that does mean is that there is not going to be as much support for our existing legacy Connect implementation in Bitbucket Cloud as there would have been before, just being very upfront and honest. It is significantly more difficult for Bitbucket Cloud to maintain our Connect implementation while migrating to Forge because it is a different Connect implementation to the other major products. And it's fundamentally not really compatible. There's no kind of graceful migration path for our current Connect apps to move into the marketplace and support monetization, whereas with Forge there is. So our plan moving forward is really to be all in on Forge. We do know that a lot of customers have existing Connect apps, and we will be supporting partners to find ways to migrate those to Forge over time. But we are realistically, the future for Bitbucket Cloud extensibility is going to be Forge and not Connect. Next slide. So where are we up to today? So late last year, I spoke to this forum and said that we just started the process of implementing Forge and that we were hoping to run a kind of EAP in 2023, first half of 2023. So in terms of where we're up to at the moment, we're actually relatively feature complete on implementing Forge UI extensibility in some areas of Bitbucket Cloud. And we've also implemented the Forge functions and Forge events in a few areas as well. So we are aiming to go for a kind of relatively light touch EAP, focusing on a few key parts of the product, specifically around the pull request experience. We are currently working on the final touches of implementing the developer console to allow third parties to deploy apps, monitor them, and maintain them. And the plan is that soon after that, we'll be looking to go to a closed EAP. So that will be with a small set of partners and potentially a small set of larger customers. And then relatively soon after that, we have something special coming into our extensibility toolkit, which we hope some people in school will be excited about. Next slide. So in terms of that EAP, there should be a link dropping into the chat now-ish in the next couple of seconds. And it will also go out as part of the post-webinar content. Please grab that link. That's a Google form. Please fill that out. And that is the enrollment form for the EAP when we do kick that off. There's a few questions in there. Please do fill them out. Participation in the EAP is not guaranteed. I want to make that really clear. It will be a small group initially, and we'll be looking to expand that out. So please do take time to fill out that enrollment form, because I guess the level of effort that's put into that enrollment form and questions and answers there will definitely play into who does get picked to be part of that EAP and who we bring into that process, while we look to sort of scale that up and roll that out more broadly. So please grab that link from the chat, fill that out if you're interested in being part of the EAP as we move forward. All right, next slide. So I mentioned before, we have something special coming. So this is our kind of our one more thing moment. So if we can go to the next slide. So we're excited to announce that we are bringing custom merge checks to Bitbucket Cloud, and these are going to be built on top of Forge. So doing our research into what makes a really powerful extensibility framework, particularly in the source control and the CI/CD space, there was some really interesting patterns that we found. And the strongest pattern was that in the CI/CD and the source control space, checks, pre-merge checks particularly, really are the kind of the special sauce that make extensibility work. And we know some of our partners who have apps already available for a server in DC. You guys know this all too well. The most successful apps in a Bitbucket server and Bitbucket DC heavily implement custom merge checks. So we are bringing custom merge checks to Bitbucket Cloud. But we are not just bringing custom merge checks. We are looking at this as the foundation for a much wider extensibility framework that we're calling our checks framework. So checks are not just going to be a thing that are going to be available at pre-merge. We're looking to extend checks all the way through the workflow. So although pre-merge will be sort of our phase one, we're looking to add checks around things like pre-pipeline and also pre-deployment. So you will be able to build apps that will be able to basically run policy and process rules, and customers will be able to use those rules to determine whether pipelines should run, whether deployments should execute, and whether code should be merged into a repository or not. So it's really exciting to sort of use this as an announcement to say that we are working on this, and we're hoping to have this available relatively soon after the EAP starts. So again, really encourage everyone to grab that form, fill it out, and be part of that process as we go forward. And with that, I will pass over to, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong slide. Sunandan.
Thank you, Edmund. Hi, everyone. So my name is Sunandan, and I'm a product manager looking into Forge storage. So today I wanted to take some time to share some updates on complex queries through custom entities, which will enable improved querying and storage capabilities on the Forge key value store. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we have already provided details around this feature during the past webinar as well. However, I wanted to take some time to do a very quick recap, as well as mention some of the changes we have introduced since the last webinar. With this feature, our focus has been on allowing new ways of structuring data and indexes on hosted storage, and provide better querying abilities like query by value, as well as adding querying filters on top of existing conditions that we have, for example, starts with. So working on improving hosted storage has been a top priority for us, and currently we are targeting around a mid-April tentative release date for the EAP. And we have already shared some updates and change logs regarding this on the developer community. Next slide, please. So jumping into what we are planning as part of the EAP release, as you will see, most of the things that we promised earlier on remain the same, like the ability to define up to 5 custom entities per app in production, with each entity having up to 50 attributes and up to 5 indexes. Through this EAP, we hope to gain more feedback on the impact of these limits and plan the improvements accordingly around that. The index types remains the same as well that we announced last time, which will be simple and named indexes. Now I want to take some time to quickly highlight some of the changes that we have introduced since our last webinar. So firstly, we now support an additional data type, which is integer, in addition to the 4 types that we already supported, that were string, float, boolean, and any. And secondly, moving into limitations, in the last webinar, we mentioned that there would be some size limits for entity objects. And today I want to confirm that this limit will be 240 KB raw for each entity object. Also to call out, float is currently not indexable, but we are already working on this. The team is trying to actively address this, and we are targeting that this should be sorted by the initial release itself. However, just in case it does not, we will continue with the release and introduce this fix as soon as possible as a rolling release. Please do note that while float is not indexable straight away, you will still be able to store data using this data type. We recently, as I said earlier, shared an update on the developer community thread, which outlines all the changes that have been made and our target release date. And as we move closer to the release, we will provide more details via dedicated EAP space and an announcement post. Next slide, please. Now to discuss more on what the participation process would look like. So firstly, this is a public EAP, so it is open for everyone. And we have decided to keep the opt-in process very simple. Just 2 things are needed. One is you would have to define custom entities in your apps manifest and share the app ID with us. We'll be sharing the form for that along with the announcement notice. And please do keep an eye on the following link, which is go.atlassian.com/complex-queries. We will be providing more details on participation and announcement for now. Thank you so much. Looking forward to getting this in your hands soon and getting your feedback on this and working on making this more valuable for you. Handing it over to Aggie now.
Thanks, Sunandan. Hi, everyone. My name is Angelina, and I'm yet another PM working on Forge. I want to start by giving you a bit of an update of what's new with Forge App Observability. We are very excited to announce that today we introduced a new metric for Forge apps called invocation time. Invocation time represents the time it takes for each function to successfully complete an invocation. The chart shows the distribution of invocation time as a histogram across different time buckets. The time is measured from inside the AWS Lambda and does not include cold start, but it does include the time it took for the Lambda initialization phase to complete. Note that the majority of cases, the initialization phase has negligible impact on how invocation time is measured. Additionally, app developers can now group Forge metrics by function, including the invocation time. When grouping the invocation time by function, app developers can identify the functions that are causing an increase in the app latency and focus on those functions with priority. Invocation time can also be grouped by version. Next slide. This will help you understand if your latest app version performs better compared to previous versions. When you use the group chart by function, the chart shows a maximum of 6 buckets. If your app has more than 5 functions, the chart will show the invocation time for 5 of the functions, where every additional function will be bundled together under all other functions. We are aware that some of your Forge apps have multiple functions, some have 20 or even more. And for this reason, we have introduced a detailed view. Next slide. Within the detailed view, you can see the individual invocation time for each function in the table below the chart. Or in other words, if your app has more than 5 functions, you will be able to see the actual P50, P90, and P95 invocation time values measured in milliseconds for all your functions. Next, I want to give you a bit of an overview of a new capability that we currently have in early access program. We call that capability multi-user app ownership. So for those of you who've already explored cloud app development with Forge, you have noticed that currently Forge apps are owned by one individual Atlassian account. This results in multiple challenges. For example, it prevents collaborative development. It limits the ongoing production support to only the app owner, because only the app owner can access the app logs and metrics via the developer console. If you want to change the ownership of your app, you need to get in touch with Atlassian, as currently that's the only way for you to complete that task. Many of you are trying to overcome this limitation by creating copies of the app and working on them locally, and then struggling to merge those changes into the actual app. Others are using shared credentials, which comes with its own challenges. It results in lost accountability, tracing of the changes made by contributors, and moreover, once the app is listed on the marketplace and used by our mutual customers, the risk of deploying a half-baked feature to production needs to be carefully managed. For this reason, some of you are keeping those credentials in a vault, and only certain individuals within the team can access them. This results in some features being too locked away for regular use. Next slide. With multi-user app ownership, we want to make it easier for you to collaboratively build Forge apps in teams. Soon the days of one Forge app and one developer will be gone, and you will be able to speed up app development and share the load of supporting your apps with your teams. Know that this is a multi-phase project, and the initial release only solves for a portion of those problems. In the weeks to come, we will continue to ship new experiences. So if you're currently working on an app, then I would encourage you to sign up to the early access program and add your teammates as collaborators. The current features available within the early access program are probably not sufficient if your needs and expectations are to be able to support your marketplace listed apps. So for those of you who want to use that capability for production, like listed apps, I would probably advise for you to wait a little bit longer. I know that some of you have already signed up for the early access program and have added multiple contributors to your app already. So I want to give a bit more detail about what's available today. Next slide. So within the early access program, app owners can add, remove, and list contributors. Contributors can create, delete, and list environments. Contributors can contribute to an app they have been added to. Contributors can add other contributors to the app. Contributors can access the app metrics through the developer console. And contributors can access the app logs from sites that they have an admin role. There are a few use cases that are currently not covered. However, a team is actively working on solving for those, and you should expect to see them included in the EAP in the coming weeks. Those include, like, multiple contributors can develop an app at the same time. Contributors can access the app logs from all sites for sharing logs, and contributors can do audit logs for changes to the app access and deployment history. As I mentioned, we're still working on unblocking concurrent development. Once this is done, continuous integration of Forge will support multiple development environments. Next slide, please. You will be able to create and delete multiple development environments with you which you can tune to and deploy to. In addition to this, each app contributor is also given their own default environment, which can be used for local development and testing. You might have noticed that most of the experiences so far are centered around the CLI. We have heard your feedback, and we are aware that you prefer to manage your apps in the developer console. Thus, future iterations will include existing and new multi-user app management functionality support through the developer console. For example, add, remove, and list contributors. Contributors can see the names and emails of other contributors through the developer console, and contributors can create, delete, and list new environments. Additionally, there will be no need to log a ticket should you want to transfer the app ownership to the member of your team. You should be able to do that by yourself instantly. Next slide. Last but not least, permissions are a crucial aspect of developing apps in teams. We are currently exploring the ability to manage and edit permissions of contributors through the developer console. Some of you have indicated that in order for this capability to be considered production ready, there should be at least basic access management available. So expect to see at least that in the weeks to come. That's all for me. Back to you, Karen.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Time for some Q&A. I'm going to start with a couple of questions that came in via the community. They were pre-submitted. The first one is from Bernhard, and I think we probably covered this during the slides, but it's definitely worth reiterating. Sanandan, would you mind turning your camera on for this one? So the question is there an ETA on the complex queries and custom entities? This is a major roadblock for a lot of apps. And then also, is there documentation for the early access program?
Hey, hi, Bernard. Thanks for the question. So as shared earlier in the presentation as well, we are aiming to have this early access out in April. And we have already started sharing some information on the developer community regarding change logs and timelines. As for the documentation, we are currently finalizing it and it should be done soon. So it will be available as part of the EAP release itself.
Awesome. And I'll go ahead and keep you here for one more. This one was also pre-submitted from Daniel Wester. What is the ETA on removing Forge only being available in the US West region? This is a major blocker or issue for us to be GDPR compliant, especially as a European company. It sort of raises challenges with using Forge.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for the question. So at a high level, we are thinking that Forge hosted storage will be pinned to the same realm as the host product, which will be determined by the end customer. Further, it is likely that hosted compute region would be based on delivering optimal performance once storage is multi-region. However, in saying this, we are still exploring all the nuances of this and will be able to provide more details as we progress. There are a number of dependencies in order for us to deliver multi-region hosted storage and compute for Forge. So we are still assessing these and therefore cannot provide any concrete timelines yet. High-level details of these dependencies were already outlined in an earlier post that we provided, and happy to come back to you and discuss more on the developer community itself.
Great. All right, thank you. Joe, if you wouldn't mind turning your camera on for this next one. This was a question that was submitted by Stefan. Can the Forge Runtime EAP be used in production apps? So for example, if you were creating a new app.
Hey, Stefan. At this stage, we will not be recommending apps in the new runtime in the early access program being suitable for production. It's possible that might change depending on how much we get done between now and then, but I hope you can appreciate that because we're touching security-related things. We want to make sure that things are airtight before allowing customers to use the apps. We'll be working to get from early access to a preview state as fast as we can. Preview is the new terminology for kind of the last step before GA, and the plan is for preview to be suitable for production usage. So looking forward to when we can give you that green light, but it won't be at the EAP at this stage.
And Joe, if you wouldn't mind sticking around for the next one also. This is from
Sure.
Daniel. For clarification, is the target for native Node.js runtime to go GA in calendar year Q4, or are we talking calendar year Q1 2024?
Hey, Daniel, sorry for the confusion around quarters. I'm sure you don't like in Australia, it's all upside down and back to front in Q1 and Q2. It's so confusing. So we're aiming for December/January for the node runtime to go to GA. So it's end of Q4, start of Q1. It's going to see how it goes. You target December and then you blink and everyone's gone and it's January. So it'll be around that time. It's right on the cusp. It's a medium confidence target at the moment, pending how much the work for the EAP goes. So once we go live with the EAP, we'll have a higher confidence date for exactly when we're targeting for the GA launch.
Excellent. All right, next question will be for you, Aggie. We are going to release a new application and want to track user activities to find out which functions are used most. Is there any platform that could help us record user activities? What is the most efficient way to review data, for example? Should they download logs from the developer console, the Forge CLI? Is there any plan to increase the feature set of Forge logs, especially with pagination?
Thanks. So currently there is no built-in support for Forge to provide behavior analytics for Forge apps. We have prioritized observability for performance and reliability first, and we don't necessarily intend to replicate the entire observability ecosystem ourselves. The best recommendation from us would be to explore third-party tools like Segment, ClickTail, or Google Analytics or Amplitude for your needs. It should be feasible to integrate the front end and back end for Forge app with these. We don't have any specific endorsement or recommendation for any particular tool. We do have plans to introduce pagination for logs. However, this is not on the short-term roadmap at the moment. I hope that answers the question. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Aggie. The next question was asked by Tom, and Adam, I'll send this one over to you. What is the status of Atlas Kit? Is it going to be replaced by a new library or maybe even open sourced?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, there's no plans to sort of replace Atlas Kit at the moment. What I would say is to sort of head to Atlassian.design and check out the Atlassian design system components, which are a subset of the Atlas Kit components. That's where sort of all the latest components will be sort of, or notifications will come out, the sort of in beta and things like that. And yeah, it's just a good place to go if you can. And I will say sort of, when it comes to Forge, once we have client-side UI kit into GA, we plan to sort of get to parity with those Atlassian design system components as well. And sort of so they'll stay all up to date. Appreciate they haven't had much love in the last couple of years, but that'll be sort of a new focus for us going forward.
Great. All right, thank you. Joe, next one is for you. This is from Daniel Wester again. Is there any update on the current developer terms on legal liability for Forge apps?
Yes, thank you for asking this, Daniel. I appreciate that we've previously had a conversation, well, not you and I, but you've previously talked to people at Atlassian about it and it's filtered through. So I'm not a lawyer and this is being recorded, so I'm going to avoid any foot in mouth situations and say that there is active work going on for the Forge team to discuss with legal the feasibility of some updates to the developer terms to make things clearer. The important thing is that we want to make sure that it's clear that you feel supported from Atlassian in building and running your app on Forge, and that we're in your corner if things go wrong and there's a way that we can help. How that maps to legal sentences, we still have to talk that through. But yes, the problem is on our radar. We haven't forgotten about it. There's still work going on to move it forward.
Great. I just wanted to hop in before we go to the next question and say, we know that some of you are having trouble accessing the Bitbucket EAP signup form. Don't worry, we are on it. We will fix the permission issues on that and definitely email it as a follow-up. Great. I'm going to send the next question to Jakob. This one is from Adrian. Is there any information on enabling Forge custom fields in the JSM service portal?
It's like we need Forge custom fields on all major views in Jira. So there's like a huge list, like transition view, new navigator, and so on. So it is on our long-term roadmap, but we still gather like interest to prioritize it correctly. So it is not scheduled, but it is on the radar. We know that it is needed. We just need to build the business case and do them other support for each view one by one, right?
Thank you. Edmund, we have a Bitbucket question. This is from Michael. When can we expect paid via Atlassian for Bitbucket cloud apps? This is key for us to know how to plan how much effort we want to put into adopting the EAP.
Yeah, really great question. And just quickly before I answer that question, we will follow up on that form for the EAP. It was working yesterday, so something's happened since then. In terms of the marketplace page for Atlassian, I want to start by saying that we are very aware of how critical this is. We have identified that the Bitbucket cloud marketplace is not the most thriving place in the world, and that's primarily because of the lack of monetization. So please do understand that we do hear you when you say that that's important. It is our number one priority. The challenge is that there are quite a few dependencies we need to work through before we can get there, and not all of them are directly inside our control. Being realistic, I can't tell you when we will have that. What I can say is that there's a pretty good chance we will not have it in 2023 calendar year. So I suspect paid by Atlassian, we're talking sometime in 2024. Now, I do want to be clear though, there most likely will be a staged approach to this where we will get Bitbucket Cloud apps into the marketplace, potentially not supporting paid by Atlassian initially, and then paid by Atlassian may come a little bit after. So when you'll be able to list apps in the marketplace might be before then, but paid by Atlassian, realistically, I'm looking 2024 calendar year.
Thank you. Adam, I'm going to switch over to you. This question is from David. When is the removal of the Forge user consent coming out? I missed the expected release date.
Cool. Yeah, sorry, that was June now, the new date.
Thanks for clarifying. And Edmund, I know you just turned your camera back off, but I'm going to ask you to come back on. Regarding Bitbucket Cloud, you mentioned that it will be fundamentally incompatible with Connect. How can we migrate our existing Connect-based customer base over to Forge?
That is an excellent question, and that is one that we would like to work very closely with our partners on understanding what the best way to do that is. We don't have an answer to that today. We just know that it is a thing that we want to make sure that we do. So we are looking at that from a bunch of different angles. One angle being technology. So how can we make it as easy as possible to migrate any existing code that you guys have written into an environment where it can work with Forge? And so some of the work that Joe's doing as an example is going to be really helpful for that once that comes to maturity. But also just around things like policy, things around like onboarding. How can we make it that permissions and scopes and things like that are the same, so that potentially we can have some sort of like warm handover process? We don't have an exact answer right now. What I would ask is that engage with the process, and as we move through this program of sort of trying to migrate across to Forge, we will be working really closely with our marketplace partners to understand what the best way to do that is and what kind of impacts different options that we investigate are going to have, so we can make sure that there's as minimal possible friction, and wherever possible we can minimize any need to sell your app again. That's obviously the worst possible outcome here, is you needing to get customers to install your app a second time. So whatever we can do to make that a warm handover, we're going to try and do.
Great. Thanks, Edmund. Joe, I have a couple of questions for you. These are from Danut. Is there an ETA for allowing editing release notes before launching a new version on Marketplace?
Yes, I can answer this. And unfortunately, the answer is no timeline at the moment. I'm sorry. I understand the frustration. It does seem like a paper cut that would be easy to fix. But at this stage, we're really trying to focusing on the most important things, keeping our team streamlined. And so we feel like the enabling capabilities we're shipping right now around runtime, data residency, access control, they kind of take priority over this problem, even though it's very annoying. A developer on my team actually recently explored a solution to this problem as a ship it project. So it's definitely on our radar. We're aware of it as a pain point, and I hope we'll be able to get to it in the future.
Cool. Next one is also for you, Joe. Are there any plans for enlarging the invocation limits? For example, the 25-second limit per invocation is a killer for reporting apps, which by definition need to process a large number of data or issues.
Yeah, so I think we readily acknowledge that the way Forge stands today, it's really not ideally suited for apps that need to perform reporting or like backfilling operations where you have to go through and spend hours kind of like updating every Jira issue. It's really hard to do at the moment with the invocation quotas that exist today and the execution limits that exist today are combined. Kind of there's like a pretty hard ceiling on how much you can do. So it's definitely something that we're going to need to address. The compute team kind of owns this problem space. And so the way that we're kind of structuring the order of things right now is number one, let's get the new runtime out the door. Number two, we're going to be supporting the data residency projects and enabling all the multi-region capabilities we need to provide. And then number three will be what can we do to beef up quotas and limits to enable more use cases to be built on Forge. So I don't have a timeline because we've just finished mapping out how we're going to get data residency and multi-region out the door. But then the current plan is that invocations and quota increases would be after that.
Awesome. Great. I want to be respectful that we're at time. So thank you to all of our panelists for answering those questions live. And thank you to everyone who's listening for taking an hour out of your day to learn a little bit about the Forge roadmap and submit your questions. This is a quarterly roadmap webinar, so we'll be back again here in 3 months. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.